Ascended Masters. Ascended Masters are spiritually enlightened beings from various different cultures and periods of time. In past incarnations, some were ordinary humans, while others may never have been human in the traditional understanding of human form. Many of these masters had intense sadhanas and practices of deep meditation that brought them to a highly enlightened state of consciousness in what we call varying levels of samadhi. They all undergo varying initiations, and the starting process is what all shamans, yogis, Brahmins, Buddhist monks, and etc. go through. This process of initiation is known as the fifth initiation. This makes an individual able to dwell consciously in the fifth dimension. Anyone can be considered an ascended master once they take the sixth initiation. This initiation is given by the universe and not by man. In the sixth initiation, a person does not merely understand, but they become I am. We refer to this as a state of full union where samadhi of varying types become unlocked. Samadhi is a Vedic term for states of superconsciousness. I live in states of samadhi on a daily basis, and in yoga traditions it is said that samadhi is not the end of yogic transformation, but merely the beginning. All the various types of samadhi are actually quantum levels apart in attainability. Don't think of them as being structured in a traditional leveling sense. It is a bit more complex than that. People that do not have intense devotion to deep spiritual practices will not taste samadhi. Think of it like trying to get fit without ever getting out of bed, and having a diet of grease and fat. The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali only give a small bit of insight into 10 types of samadhi in various siddhis. The term siddhi is a description for supernatural abilities that culminate as a byproduct of deep spiritual practices. If you reflect on the differences between being awake and dreaming while you sleep, this will give you a small example of two majorly different forms of consciousness. This is the best example I can give in trying to show how different everyday consciousness is from samadhi. In being aware of the cosmologies included within non-physical worlds, we are brought to a special place where we can learn to surf the varied superconscious states. By becoming one with the absolute infinite, you then dissolve further inward and lose the illusion of self and simply become. The state I live in is like being drunk and high, but my brain doesn't feel fuzzy or clouded. I'm not affected physically, and I feel sober while I'm completely high at the same time. Another byproduct of deep meditation and spiritual practices is the development of siddhis. You don't set a goal to achieve them. They are cosmic gifts, and some practices can lead to very specific siddhis, but it's not the purpose of those practices. The siddhis pale in comparison to the states of consciousness they are attached to, and where the consciousness sits above the ego. Mastery over certain meditations can lead to the power of flight, teleportation, bilocation, and walking through dense physical matter, walking on water, transmuting elements into other elements, and many others, like pyrokinesis and telekinesis. The list could go on, infinite. I will not reveal the identity of my Satguru, the master of your masters, but I have witnessed him perform the anama, which is the ability to shrink down to the size of an atom. I realize how it sounds, but things can get seriously weird in the temples. You can only imagine how mind-blowing of an experience it was to watch a monk shrink down to the size of a grain of rice and then dance in the palm of your hand. My Satguru has done other things that I cannot break my vow of secrecy in explaining or talking about. I will, however, attest to the fact I witnessed him walk through a closed door and driving a nail through his hand and showing no wound. The things that I have witnessed within Theravada traditions are not only hard to wrap my mind around, but they've unlocked things within me that I never dreamed possible. Bonpo traditions date back 2,000 years before the creation of modern Buddhism. The teachings were given to High Lama monks by masters from the 64th dimension. These traditions gave birth to all the Buddhist traditions. It is the foundation that they were built upon. I met a very powerful Lama from this lineage. I cannot give her name, but I can share a couple things from my time with her. The moment I met her was indescribable. She enveloped my energy into her reality bubble. This was done because I was not at a high enough vibration to be in her presence. This Lama's vibrations were so high that I was drawn upward within a magnetic pull. My consciousness elevated by just being in her presence. You can't begin to understand what just talking to her felt like. The words coming out of her mouth were hitting me in waves of pure oxytocin. My body physically shuddered. Her movements were liquid ecstasy being rippled outward to me with the simple motions of her walking. This presence was my closest understanding to what it would be like to encounter God here in the physical. The moment I saw her, tears of joy flowed from my face. Time would pass in her presence, and the need of using the bathroom or having hunger and thirst was only experienced when she left my sight. Since I'm not going to say her name, I'll tell you a story that will give you an inkling of her power. She had a friend that was a high-ranking lama, beloved by his community and envied by an acolyte, student of a tradition. The acolyte could not cast a curse on the lama, so he affixed it to the tail of a dog that the lama would pet each day. Upon petting the dog, he fell severely ill and knew magic was involved. He contacted his friend, the female lama. She did one thing, and the curse broke immediately. With a blank piece of paper, she pierced it with a purba, spiritual dagger made of 3 different metal alloys, about a dozen times. The next day, the acolyte who placed the curse was identified. He was found with puncture marks all over his chest and belly, discovered at the foot of a river. The High Lama recovered immediately and called his friend, the female Lama, who was several thousand miles away. She shared this story and many others with me. This Lama is the most powerful master that I have ever had the privilege to train under. I learned some very powerful magic from her, and to be honest, I don't find a need to use it because it's a bit above what I feel comfortable doing. I want to tell you another story, one that does not involve me at all. It is about a man who has historical documentation of living and performing miracles. Witnesses saw him resurrect a dead person. He had also healed many sick people with just his hands. He had the ability to materialize food and liquid inside of empty glasses, and he could read minds, even from great distances. If you were to assume that I'm talking about Jesus Christ, you'd be greatly mistaken. I'm actually talking about a man named Paramhansa Yogananda. He was a very powerful yogi, and many highly reputable sources and people have seen him perform genuine miracles. One of the things that Yogananda advocated was not boasting his powers. He only used them when he felt called to by the divine. He also said something once, which resonates with me deeply. He had said that spiritual advancement is not equated to external powers, but is more appropriately based in the depth of one's bliss while in meditation. One of the most incredible things about Yogananda is how he actually died. Before he had ascended, he gathered disciples and told them he would be leaving this world. It was documented, and government officials of India were in attendance. After his final message was given, he looked up to the ceiling, and his body slumped to the floor, completely lifeless. 21 days after Yogananda had passed, his body remained in pristine condition and had not decomposed at all. This was all documented and even featured in Time magazine. To this day, Yogananda still appears before followers. He comes in a body of light, or the shawl he always wore is seen, and his presence felt. Buddhist and Hindu traditions, along with Jainism and Taoism, have so many incredible stories of ascended masters. Senior Buddhist monks are known as Lungpor in Theravada traditions. This translates to Heavenly Father. LP Pern, Lungpor Pern, Tithanang Kuno, was known as the Tiger Pacifier monk. He is still highly revered in Thailand even after his passing in 2002. I have the great honor of owning a powerful Falyant, holy cloth with polyscript spellwork, and an inscribed boar's tusk that was made by him. I even have a tiger medallion. He gained the title of Tiger Pacifier by chanting in front of tigers and using only mantra to subdue them. This was witnessed numerous times by tribes in rural villages all over Thailand. LP Pra Pompunyo is another famous monk that hails from Thailand. As a baby, he nearly drowned. It was in that incident where his parents discovered he had divine powers. LP Pra Pompunyo was playing while his parents cooked. It was heavily raining and started to flood. The water swept the baby away, and he found himself floating down towards the river. He did not drown, and was sitting on a pillow that didn't sink in the water. His parents retrieved him from the river, but by all accounts he should have drowned. Taoist immortals are also worth mentioning. They are interesting because they are worshipped and more akin to being literal gods. The main 8 are said to live on a group of islands in the Bohai Sea. An island of notoriety that's tied to them is the Pingali Mountain Island. Early literature before the 1970s had mistaken them for being jinn, Middle Eastern genies. Immortals have many powers, such as the ability to transform into different creatures, including cryptids and ordinary objects. They have dense physical bodies that never age and are capable of amazing feats of strength like lifting mountains. They can even use qi to control people, animals, and objects. Lao Tzu is actually one of many others who are believed to have become immortal. His descendant, Zheng Shui, is also noted as one. What is probably the weirdest part about Taoist immortals would be the various described types. Apparently, the practices done to achieve the immortal state can and sometimes do go wrong. Ghost immortals are low-tier immortals who are forever stuck on Earth and unable to visit higher dimensions due to cultivating too much yin energy. One of my masters, we will simply call Z, taught me about the esoteric traditions within what would some deem Christianity, or, the esoteric gnosis of Christianity. He explained to me how angels are a species of higher dimensional beings that come from the 7th dimension all the way up to the 37th and 38th. Think of them as a type of celestial with the ability to incarnate into multiple bodies at the same time. I will get deeper into that subject on another day, but what amazed me the most with Z was his mastery over telepathy. He could explain things inside my head, and often before I even asked him a question, he was explaining it inside my mind. Z taught me how to enter the veil. He warned me of the dangers and told me stories of magicians that left this world by escaping into the veil during times in history where many were hunted. He had a student that got too ahead of himself and got stuck in the veil. He had to slowly pull him out, step by step in the fashion that he had entered. I know Z can command lightning with his staff. It's pretty incredible to witness such a feat. On a clear day with no clouds in the sky, he can simply point his staff at a spot in the air, and lightning would strike and dance about in that exact same spot. Z wasn't always who he is today. Years ago, he was battling a bunch of demonic entities and they overtook him. In his last dying breath, he called out, and a being of light descended and entered his body. Lightning then destroyed all the demonic entities that surrounded him. The soul of the man had been taken away and switched places with Z. This is what we call a walk-in. Think of it as a mixture of possession and trading souls. I still talk to Z and trade with him on occasion, and all of my masters, Z is the one that I have the deepest connection with for some very special reasons. I've had many teachers, and I still study under a few of them. Some I cannot speak about, while others I need to be a bit secretive of with their identities. I'll share some stories from one more of my teachers. This lady taught me in Wiccan traditions. I became a high priest in her coven and learned so much about herbs and candles. Her name is Charlita. I call her mother because she was better to me than my own ever was. She has a collection of wooden sculptures that have the spirits of trolls inside of them. They whisper and move all on their own. I have one, and he has been a really good protector. He is also a bit vain and enjoys toilet humor. Charlita taught me how to access past lives by entering the Hall of Doors, the Akashic Records, which is accessed through the Akashic body. She showed me the secrets behind mastering astral travel and battling in the astral. She's very much so a master. I've witnessed her radiating white light from her body and have seen her bring dead flowers back to life. When I say dead flowers, I mean wilted and shriveled. All she did was breathe on them, and they somehow just managed to come back to life spontaneously. Kind of hard to explain those things when you see them. There's been rituals that she's performed where spirits manifested before us and orbs danced around her, all visible with the naked eye. We can't conclude this article without talking on the subject known as the body of light. This transformation has various names in cultures all over the world. Sufism refers to it as the sacred body of highest attainment, or the supra-celestial body. Taoism calls it the diamond body. Taoist immortals or cloud walkers. Yogic traditions and Tantra call it the divine body, body of light, or body of bliss. The Egyptians called it the luminous body, Karast, or being Ak. Gnosticism simply refers to it as the perfect body. Hermetic corpus also carries a simple terminology by referring to it as the immortal body. Tibetan Buddhism is where we get the term rainbow body. I could go on, but you're now aware that this isn't just centered in Hindu or Buddhist traditions. What would you say if I told you there's over 160,000 documented cases of people achieving the body of light? One that was witnessed in 1998 by Reverend Francis V. Tizo described the metamorphosis of a Tibetan monk. The name of that monk was Khenpo E Chao, and he transformed his physical body into a literal rainbow body. It is in our very nature to be able to attain a transformation like this. Human beings are deeply spiritual creatures. We are like miniature nuclear reactors with the propensity for unfathomable power that can only be attained by going inward. Khenpo E Chaos died in a similar fashion to Yogananda. He left by choice. After his death, dozens of rainbows dotted the sky and intertwined over his hut. Khenpo E Chaos was reciting the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum repetitiously, and then his energies peaked and he left his body. According to the eyewitnesses, upon his last breath, his flesh became a bright pink and it shimmered very brightly. His body had weird circumstances surrounding it. These are common things that occur with ascended masters. Disciples said that they could see through the monk's robes and that his body was shrinking. After a period of 7 days, the disciples removed the yellow cloth and no body remained, not even a hair. Guru Rinpoche, also known as Padma Sambhava, is another person of notable interest and one of the first documented cases of transformation. The evidence is astounding. He actually left deep footprints inside of stone. The reason this phenomena is possible is due to a monk flipping the stone molecules into time-space and leaving an impression inside of the stone. Padma Sambhava was the first to do this, but many have since done this as well, and to this day you can still go to the Himalayas and see the footprints for yourself. When he attained the body of light, many witnesses saw him fly in the air and transform his body into a dragon and various other forms. He did this to terrify evil spirits, which he then converted into benevolent protectors. The secret to turning into a light body is actually very simple, but is so hard to actually achieve. You must love everything, all the time, and with the intensity of the divine source. There's so much work needed before you can just embody that, such as reciting mantra for years, mastery over mudra, profound awareness, disillusionment of ego, and being purely empty and non-reactive to all phenomena. The descriptions of what the experience feels like are impossible to imagine. All sound is heard as mantra and felt in vibrations. Thoughts become separate of physical senses, and vision appears in the form of mandalas and cosmological forces. The transformation from ordinary body into a light body is a complex process. This process spans over 7 days and starts with the physical body dissolving into the soul without dying. It's actually our natural state. Being made of clear light is the next major step in our evolution. The next step is Bhuta Shuddhi, as it's known in yoga. This is the cleansing of the elements. When the elements inside the body become purified, the flesh and marrows turn into pure essence. The final part of the transformation is when a rainbow of colors formed in the pure essence dissolve into each other. Fingernails and hair are the only remaining physical features that stay. This specific process differs from the formation of the celestial body when one attains enlightenment and sheds their physical body first, such as Paramhansa Yogananda, for example. On the topic of various forms of transforming the body and raising energies to an ascended status, we need to talk about jeeva samadhi. In Tibet, it is known as the state of tuktam, meaning becoming one. It can only be known and realized if a person merges with the divine. Once a person attains samadhi, they either have sadhanas to hold on to and preserve the body, or they dispose of the body and ascend. If one holds on to the body with continued spiritual practices, they can continue the ascension process until their energies peak. It's important we understand the differences between maha samadhi and jiva samadhi. With maha samadhi, you shed the body like changing your shirt. You may consider this to be spiritual suicide, a willful leaving of the body, but it is deeper than that. Jiva samadhi is a bit more complex. With jiva samadhi, you cannot say the physical body dies. You also can't say it's truly alive either. The energy that peaks forms a preservation of the physical. It's similar to mummification. It becomes an anchor for the spirit and circulates in the fashion of a self-sustaining battery. Think of the monks who are encased in gold leaf while sitting in lotus pose. Signs of life can be detected by scientific testing, but the body is not truly alive. These bodies do not decay, and if they do, it can take thousands of years. The natural iron in the physical body now acts as a magnetic force, which replaces the chi. Breathing and blood circulation come to a halt in this suspended state of animation. The pranic force keeps the cells in the body nourished and alive. The tissue may shrivel, but it's measurably living. This pranic force can influence mankind outside of the physical body. The bodies sometimes dematerialize and reappear in other places in the world. Take Sadasiva Brahmendra, for example. He has 3 jiva samadhis at different locations in the world. This guy literally reincarnated continually. Each time he visited his jiva samadhis, gathered the power from them, and then devotees and seekers often would seek out the sites of these jiva samadhi, which are in temples or tombs. The power that is emitted from them can attune the consciousness and raise the vibrations. These sites are basically a giant kundalini energy field. Visiting these sites is an old custom in India and many other countries. Just bearing witness to a body in jiva samadhi is said to purify the energy of one's body and purge the karma of lifetimes. Each siddha, or master, decides before taking jiva samadhi how exactly they want their tomb to be made and the way their body should be placed. In South India, the jiva samadhi structures for channeling the energies can be temples, meaning they actually build an entire temple around the jiva samadhi itself. Tamil Nadu is host to about 300. Mahavatar Babaji had said these jiva samadhis are responsible for global change. The very energies that are emitted from these sites are what prevent the mass populace from diving into full-blown primitive action that brings doom. Their constant and silent efforts working in the background are what keep balance.